in his penultimate report, Bryn Richard Cowley looks at whether or not the shootings were actually justified and explains the soldiers' yellow card system.
Was there any justification for the soldiers opening fire? And typically with the Widgery report, the same thing can be said and was said by the troops on the ground, and that is that they suspected they were being attacked by nail bombs, that Martin McGuinness had in fact said in the Saville inquiry that he had placed some what he called super snipers that were overlooking William Street, and that one of those snipers is suspected to have fired first at approximately 5 to 4 that afternoon at a machine gun position in William Street, which they then obviously assumed, was reason to return fire. At the same time in William Street, a nail bomber was said to have attempted to throw something in their direction. So that gave them cause to open up. And in that particular instance, two people were shot dead, 2 civilians. Later, at 4:05 in another area of the Bogside, well, in fact, in Rossville Flats area, this is when Lieutenant Colonel Wilford decided to initiate an action which led to support company being deployed into the Rossville area, which, however, was not in his orders. He decided that himself. And after so doing, an officer on the ground had fired 2 shots above the heads of known protesters because he thought that he was in danger, his rifle may have been taken, he was being overwhelmed by thousands of people. We have to realize there was up to 7,000 people on the streets that day, and so there was fear and panic at all ranks and levels. People said they'd heard shots. There was plastic bullets previously being fired that day. There was a smell in the air. Helicopters were overhead. The whole thing was very, very panicky and sensitive. And so people were apt to open up very easily. People were saying that they saw gunmen in windows and they'd fired at it legitimately. Yellow card rules were applied that day, but in the crowd and the melee and the noise, obviously no witnesses, particularly on the RA side, would want to testify to that. And also, Martin McGuinness had testified in the Saville inquiry. People suspected that Martin McGuinness had been carrying a submachine gun, a Thompson machine gun, on him that day. Martin McGuinness that day was a young man, and he was said to be in charge of the IRA at the time. Given that from 1969 to 1972 there were so many deaths and the IRA were certainly active, the paras on the ground were certainly expecting trouble, and to be sniped at, people were defending themselves, their weapons with their lives. So the whole thing was a right mess, basically. You couldn't say what was going on. But for them to shoot 14 civilians, and sometimes on the ground crawling away or running away.
Now, you mentioned something called yellow card rules.
The yellow card rule was actually quoted in the Saville inquiry, as I mentioned earlier, by Lord Carrington, who was relying upon that specific as part of his defence. The yellow card rule was an invention, basically, that allows a soldier to detach his mind from the panic at the time while he's holding a live weapon, go into his top left-hand pocket, pull out a physical card, a yellow card, which on the back has a set of legal obligations that he has to read to himself, and also shout out loudly to anybody that he thinks is endangering his life, i.e. with a loaded weapon or is about to pull a gun, etc. When he thinks his life's in danger, he has to apply the yellow card rule. So it's a psychological sort of initiative that allows a soldier to think twice, take his finger, you might say, off the trigger before he initiates an action. And all soldiers basically follow that rule. But of course, in the heat of this moment, where you've got helicopters and noise and bangs going off, it's difficult to find testimony or evidence to that.
And in a final report that he's done for us, Bryn Richard Cowley, ex-Parachute Regiment soldier, tells us what his conclusions are.
12 years and 191 million quid later, David Cameron issued an apology on behalf of the government, where he said that he was deeply sorry about what had happened. The conclusions of the report, he said, were shocking. The inquiry exonerated all Catholic victims. It said that they were not posing a threat or causing death or serious injury. Cameron went on to explain what happened on Bloody Sunday was wrong, and because the government of the day is no longer around, that it fell to him to issue an apology instead. Now, well, I've also served in Northern Ireland myself with 3 para, I think it would be fair to say that David Cameron has reached the correct conclusion. It's clearly the case that there are a lot of suspicious issues that go right to the top of the government and right to the top of the MOD, and it's clearly not just the parachute regiment soldiers' fault, who are nevertheless carrying the can of worms of blame, you know.
I obviously agree with that. I think that blaming individual soldiers, it misses the point. It's a whole policy that was being pursued from the top, which needs to be recognised and investigated, but not in terms of punishing people. I mentioned Brigadier Gordon Kerr earlier, who's actually in Iraq, as far as we know. I don't want to see him punished. I want to see everything that was done in the struggle in Northern Ireland looked into in an impartial light, in view of trying to create reconciliation and peace on all sides. Lots of bad things were done by all sorts of people. Let's put it behind us and move on. But let's not forget any of it.
And thank you very much to Bryn Richard Cowley, ex-soldier in the Parachute Regiment, for that report. Well, that's all for this week. Coming up next is the Sky News at 7 o'clock. Music coming up next, and the most pleasant mash-up to the weekend with Sam, a.k.a. DJ Spungold. Do please join us at 5 on Friday drive time each week here on BCFM 93.2. If you have a story for us, questions about this evening's programme, or would like to suggest a guest for a future show, please go to our webpage, thisweek.org.uk, or email me at tony@bcfm.org.uk. Thanks very much to this week's guest in the first hour, Lib Dem Councillor for Clifton East and Deputy Leader of Bristol City Council, Simon Cook. Thanks also to Marina Morris and Mike Birkin for their reports, and to our old Labour Oxford economist, Martin Summers. Next week, the badger cull. Thousands of protected badgers are destined to die. But is this about medical necessity or our vested interests behind the cull? That's at 6 o'clock next week. If you're on broadband internet, you can hear all previous Friday drive times, including my hour-long report on mobile phone masts and wireless safety, and our investigation into leadership charity Common Purpose, as well as our special on the Good Friday Agreement and Irish history by going to thisweek.org.uk and clicking on the archives. I'm Tony Gosling, wishing you a relaxing and enjoyable weekend.
BCFM is the community radio station for Bristol and is here to give everybody in Bristol a voice.